I would say probably a third of our patients are Christians and coming from a Christian background and recognizing some of these things. I think the Christian community is very diverse in their response to psychology. So some of them are very accepting. Some of them are this doesn't even exist. You're making stuff up. So it's kind of this broad range of responses. And there's a couple of ways um, it's kind of, I guess the best analogy I could draw would be something like if I were diagnosed with cancer or if I had diabetes. If I have a medical condition, there's how do we respond as Christians, right? So it's kind of a similar thing. So it's not like, hey, we should definitely pray for people who have cancer. So when people have cancer, we want to pray over them. We want to be supportive of them. We want to be able to figure out how to help them. But it's not like, okay, we're done praying. We're done with treatment. That's all we do. Is we also look at what does the research actually say is useful. Well, depending on the individual, it might be surgery, it might be radiation treatment, it might be chemotherapy. Um, that's going to be the primary way of dealing with that disorder. But in regards to in solving that issue, but that doesn't mean God's not part of that. So I think for some reason recently we have this divide of we have Christianity and we have science. If you think about it, if God is the God of everything, he's the God of science too. So it's not like this is a separate realm. We're just trying to figure out what we actually know and what we can address and help with. So with that in mind, absolutely we should pray for those who are suffering from a mental disorder. But that's not all we should be doing. We're trying to figure out also what makes sense and what does the research tell us is going to be useful. Do I conversely also strongly believe that sin is the cause of why we have mental disorders, but sin's also the reason why we have things in general. We even have death, let alone any sort of medical issue like cancer. So in that way, is we need to deal with some of these things going beyond just because we have very often like Matthew 6, like just don't worry. Well, if that's simple, then people who had a clinical issue of worry, they would have done that already. So if it's a short-term acute thing, yeah, I probably shouldn't have to worry about like how tomorrow's test is going to go. I'm still going to feel anxious about it, but I'm okay in that way, as opposed to I'm constantly worried about everything. And if I'm not worried about this test, I'm worried about the test after that, or how that's going to affect my GPA, or will my GPA is so low that I can't get into college? If I don't go to the right college, I'm not going to get a right job. So they'll always find something to worry about. That's something different than just a general lower level, a counseling level of worry, or even just, yeah, it's just today. When we have that level of worry where it's now causing me difficulty sleeping, muscle tension, concentration issues, fatigue, now we're at a level where we got a problem that we need to address in a different way of just kind of talking with friends. And then in terms of actual treatment, we talk about some of the things we're talking about right now, an understanding of why, to some extent, does God have me going through this? In the same way, why would have God have someone go through cancer? Not that cancer is a great thing, but this is part of God's plan. And if I trust that God is outside of time and sees everything, somehow this is good. We may understand it at certain points. At some points, we may not. But my mom died of cancer when I was in my early 30s, and it brought my family, my dad and my brother and I together because my mom was kind of the linchpin. So without my mom, we had to learn to communicate without my mom. Would I rather have my mom back? Absolutely. Can I see good out of my mom passing? Yes. So somehow I just see a glimpse of God's plan in that is without my mom kind of proctoring the three of us, the three of myself, my brother, my dad, we wouldn't be as close as we are today. So we have to trust that even though we may not know everything of God's plan, and we're not supposed to, is that I understand that this pathway is good. And I have to be okay with, for whatever reasons, these are the issues that in my life that I'm going to have to deal with. And then importantly, everyone has different issues, be it psychological, physical, or whatever else it might be. Everyone has their own struggles, and understanding that these are the things that God put in our lives to ideally grow us closer to him and to glorify him. We may not know why. And if we look at, I think the book of Job is a good example of that as well, where from Job's perspective and his friends, you must be doing something wrong. You somehow have made a mistake with God. And God is pretty clear at the end that that's not the case. And from Job's perspective, he still doesn't understand what happened or why, but he's still glorifying God. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is it's almost having a peace that I have anxiety, not always that I have peace in my life completely, but I understand this is part of who I am. And I am okay with the fact I'm at peace that I have cancer. I am at peace that I have worry. and knowing that eventually, and if I'm addressing everything I can, then I'm okay with what's going on with my chemo. I'm going okay with my therapy that I'm going through. But I think that, and again, easier said than done. But there is treatment, and it is relatively brief. So the empirical treatment protocol that we use for generalized anxiety disorders, 18 sessions, panic disorders, 12. And the idea is, if you're looking for treatment, you should be looking for a provider. If it's anxiety or OCD, that is cognitive behavioral therapy based, and that there's probably something called exposure and response prevention that's going out and doing these things rather than avoiding them. And one really good way to tell is there homework? Are the things that you're doing outside the session? It's not simply meeting once a week for 45 minutes, because it's kind of like learning a new language. You can't learn a new language once a week if I'm only spending 45 minutes. So those are things to look for. And no, I think the hardest part is settling in and knowing that this, in the end, will be okay.